Nearly every country in the world is in debt. The United States now owes more than $38 trillion, dollars, the highest level in its history. The European Union carries around $14 trillion dollars in debt. Japan is close to $9 trillion. dollars. Even oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia or export powerhouses such as Germany and China carry enormous amounts of debt. And this brings up a simple but unsettling question. If everyone is in debt, then who is actually getting paid? That question pulls us into a world where money, power, and history are tightly intertwined. And one thing needs to be clear from the very beginning. Debt is not just a problem, it is the foundation of the modern world. Wars, crises, economic booms and collapses, all of them rest on this invisible system of promises. If you follow these promises far enough, you arrive at a strange conclusion. The world is not really in debt to anyone in particular. In a way, it is in debt to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. Today, total global debt is over $315 trillion, dollars, nearly 3 times the size of the world economy. So how did we get here? Not through credit cards or digital banking. Through wars. In 1694, England was at war with France and running out of gold. The king turned to merchants for help. In exchange for regular interest payments guaranteed by future tax revenues, they lent money to the state. To manage this arrangement, the Bank of England was created. This changed everything. For the first time, a state could spend money it did not yet have. And the lenders gained something extremely valuable, the promise of the state, a promise that could be bought, sold, and transferred. This was the birth of government bonds, the backbone of today's financial system. France embraced the idea, the Netherlands refined it, and the young United States financed its revolution and later its expansion using this system. Over time, debt stopped being a sign of weakness and became a symbol of trust. If a country could borrow, it meant others believed in it. Empires once conquered land to extract gold. Now they issued bonds to earn interest. The battlefield shifted from land to balance sheets. Today, debt is everywhere. Every country borrows, every bank lends, and every person through taxes, savings, pensions, and insurance is part of the system. At the same time, both debtor and creditor. Let's look at the United States. Its debt is not just national, it's global. About half of the $38 trillion dollars is held by investors, and most of those investors are American. Banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and even the Federal Reserve. Roughly 1/3, around $9 trillion dollars, is held by foreign countries. Japan is the largest foreign holder. China follows. So yes, the US owes China money, but that is only a very small portion of the total. In reality, America owes money mostly to itself, and this pattern repeats everywhere. Japan lends to the United States. The US lends to Europe through institutions like the IMF. Europe lends to developing countries through the World Bank. Developing countries lend back by holding Western bonds as reserves. This is a global loop of promises. Everyone is holding someone else's IOU. The system works as long as no one panics and leaves the table. Behind all of this are financial markets, pension funds, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks managing tens of trillions of dollars. They decide who can borrow cheaply and who must pay a heavy price. When trust disappears, currencies collapse, governments fall, and economies can unravel overnight. Democracy chooses leaders. Markets decide who survives. At the very center of the system are central banks. They don't just manage debt, they create it. When a central bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in return. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. Every dollar in circulation represents a debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money. This system has stood on trust for decades. Investors do not expect governments to fully repay their debt. They expect interest to keep flowing. Debt is not meant to be paid off. It is meant to be rolled over. Governments refinance old debt with new debt, again and again. Interest is the real product. What's being sold is stability. That's why countries like Japan can carry debt exceeding 250% of GDP and still borrow at near zero interest rates. Investors are not waiting for repayment. They are waiting for renewal. In fact, if a country like the United States suddenly paid off all its debt, it would cause chaos. Banks, pension funds, and markets would lose their safest assets. Money would be pulled out of the system, deflation would follow, and the economy would stall. Strange but true, paying off the debt would break the system. That's why politicians who talk about eliminating the national debt are selling a comfort. That's why politicians who talk about eliminating the national debt are selling a comforting story. The real goal is not to erase debt, but to keep it manageable, serviceable, and believable. Because once belief disappears, the numbers stop mattering. And here's the uncomfortable part. Even if we say we owe it to ourselves, the money does not flow evenly. Interest payments move upward, from workers and taxpayers to institutions and investors. Debt is not just a transfer between countries, it is a transfer between classes. That's why rising debt and rising inequality often move together. There is no single villain at the top of this system. Not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. All of them. All of them. And us. Debt has become money. Governments issue it. Banks multiply it. Investors trade it. Ordinary people depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor has blurred. Debt once meant bondage. Today it means balance. But balance depends on trust. And trust does not last forever. When it breaks, we remember what debt really is. A promise that cannot be kept indefinitely. If this gave you a new perspective, stay curious. History has answers, if you know where to look.